let me tell you about the day I learned what silence could do. It wasn't the silence of an empty house, though I'd come to know that one too in the months that followed. It wasn't the quiet of a marriage running out of things to say, the conversational desert we'd been crossing for years. No, this was a different silence entirely. Active, potent, a living thing. The quiet of a trap being set, piece by deliberate, patient piece, over 1,095 consecutive days. 3 years of held breath, of performed normalcy, of watching and waiting with the cold, clear focus of a chess master who already knows the final checkmate, but must play through every intervening move. It ended, as these things often do, in a room full of people who understood nothing of what was truly happening. A courtroom on the 7th floor of the county courthouse. April light, sharp and hopeful, sliced through the tall, grimy windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the beams like tiny, indifferent ghosts. My soon-to-be ex-husband, Vincent Mercer, sat exactly 10 feet and 2 inches away from me, a distance I could measure in the heartbeat thudding in my ears. He was wearing a suit, charcoal gray, Italian wool, the one I'd helped him pick out for a client presentation 5 years earlier. It cost more than my first car. He was smiling, not at me, at the future he believed he had just legally pocketed, signed, sealed, and delivered. It was the smile of a man who has won the lottery and is already mentally spending the jackpot. His lawyer, an expensive man named Harold Whitfield, with a voice like expensive gravel and cufflinks that probably cost more than my monthly rent, leaned close to Vincent's ear. The distance between our tables was too great for me to hear the whisper, but I knew the words. I'd helped choose them, after all. My lawyer, Nina, and I had crafted that particular phrase with surgical precision. 5 words. A simple, legal clarification, buried in the addendum to Schedule C of the dissolution agreement. And I watched. I wish you could have seen it, the way a painter might wish you to see a particular sunset, as that smile on Vincent's face didn't just fade. It dissolved. It was as if the invisible scaffolding holding up his entire expression, the carefully constructed mask of triumph, had been yanked away by an unseen hand. The color left his cheeks, not in a flush of embarrassment or anger, but in a slow, sickly retreat, like the tide going out to reveal barren, ugly sand. His hands, which had just been signing his name with a victorious, looping flourish, began to tremble. A fine, almost imperceptible vibration that traveled up his wrists. The Mont Blanc pen, a gift from his mother for his 30th birthday, rolled from his slack fingers and clattered onto the polished oak table, a sound shockingly loud in the hushed room. For the first time in 3 long, patient, excruciating years, I allowed myself to feel it. Not joy exactly. Something purer, colder, and more profound. A deep, seismic shift in the bedrock of my being. The moment when the last domino in an impossibly long, complex line finally tips. And you hear, at last, the single, satisfying click of the entire, elaborate design snapping into its final, completed form. It was the sound of patience paying its compound interest. His head swiveled. He looked across the charged space between us. For a flicker that seemed to stretch into an eternity, his eyes met mine. And in them, I saw it. The dawning, horrifying comprehension. The puzzle pieces tumbling into place with brutal, devastating clarity. He wasn't looking at Alexis Dunst, his meek, defeated, soon-to-be ex-wife. He was looking at the architect, the planner, the patient woman who had been standing in the shadows of his life, blueprint in hand, while he admired the facade. But I'm getting ahead of myself. A story of this scale, this depth of quiet vengeance, demands proper footing. It requires context. You need to understand the ground he stood on, the foundation he was so arrogantly sure of, before I explain how I quietly, methodically, and with infinite patience, removed every stone from beneath him until the entire edifice had no choice but to collapse under its own hollow weight. My name is Alexis Dunst. I was 34 years old when it ended in that sun-dusted courtroom. But the beginning, the real beginning, the first stitch in this long tapestry of betrayal and reclamation, was half a lifetime before that, in a world that smelled of photocopier toner and cheap coffee, when I was a girl who still believed in the solidity of things. I met Vincent Mercer when I was 17 years old, a girl in a too-stiff blouse, drowning in the echoing corridors of Henderson, Price, and Leland, a law firm that smelled of old money and older paper. I'd graduated high school early, not because I was a genius, but because I was fiercely, desperately practical. My home was a symphony of quiet tension, and I wanted out. The filing clerk job paid minimum wage and came with 1,000 paper cuts, but it was mine. It was freedom in weekly installments. He was 24, a new associate, a golden boy with a smile that seemed to generate its own light. He moved through the gray landscape of the firm like a sunbeam, trailing confidence and expensive cologne. I was organizing deposition transcripts in the supply room when he first spoke to me. He needed a specific case file, and I knew exactly where it was, buried under 3 boxes of discovery from a corporate merger. When I produced it in under a minute, he didn't just thank me. He looked at me, really looked, and said, "Efficiency, I like that. Most people here just create more chaos." That was the hook. Not flattery about my looks, but recognition of a skill I prized. To a girl who built her self-worth on competence, it was a potent drug. Our courtship was a whirlwind built on his grand declarations. Over lukewarm coffee in the firm's break room, he'd sketch empires on legal pads. Not dreams, blueprints. He spoke of real estate developments, commercial properties, a name, Mercer Holdings. That would mean something. His certainty was a radiant, intoxicating heat. I, the cautious planner, the saver, the one who read the fine print, mistook his unshakable arrogance for strength. I saw in him the boldness I lacked, the willingness to reach for the horizon. I didn't yet understand that some people reach not to build, but simply to possess, to show. We married 6 weeks after my 19th birthday. It felt like a rebellion, a definitive step into a shiny, adult future. My parents worried. His mother, Lorraine, gave me a scrutinizing, dismissive once-over that would become her signature look. But Vincent was persuasive. He made it feel inevitable, glorious. Our son, Tyler, was born a year later, a gentle, observant baby who seemed to watch the world with ancient eyes. And I, ever the practical one, did what made sense. I kept my job at the firm, part-time, while navigating new motherhood. I continued contributing to my $401,000, a small, automatic deduction that felt like a whispered secret between my present and future self. My grandmother, a woman who had lived through wars and recessions with her dignity and a modest bank account intact, had a mantra she drummed into me. A woman should have her own, not secret money tucked away in shame, just her own. Money that answers to no one but her. It echoed in my head, a steady, grounding rhythm beneath the lullabies and client invoices. When Tyler was 3, Vincent closed his first major deal, a strip mall development on the outskirts of town. The commission was substantial. He came home, swept me up in a hug that lifted me off my feet, and laughed. "The empire is officially under construction." That night, over takeout champagne, he made his pitch. "I need you, Alexis, full-time. The business is taking off. I need someone I can trust completely to run the back end. The books, the clients, the contractors, the chaos. I can't pay you market rate yet," he said, his eyes shining with shared destiny, "but we're building this together. It's an investment in us." It sounded like a partnership. It felt like a promotion from wife to co-founder. So I quit my job at the law firm, said goodbye to my own paycheck and my professional identity, and became the unpaid, untitled, all-consuming foundation of Mercer Holdings. My office was the converted sunroom of our first small house. My title was wife. My job description was infinite. I was the bookkeeper, tracking every dollar in and out. I was the office manager, fielding calls, scheduling appointments, managing correspondence. I was the HR department for the handful of freelancers he hired. I was the interior designer, choosing finishes for model homes to make them feel warm and sellable. I was the therapist, soothing disgruntled subcontractors when payments were delayed. I was the marketing department, writing copy for brochures. I was the event planner for open houses. The official company photo, framed in the lobby of the small office he eventually rented, showed Vincent, handsome and beaming in front of a rendering of a future apartment complex. I was the one who had taken that rendering to the printer, who had chosen the frame, who had cropped the photo, formatted it, and ordered the prints. I was the silent engine in the belly of the ship, and he was the captain on the deck, waving at the horizon. For 11 years, this was my life. I learned every capillary and artery of his business, which became our business in everything but name, legal ownership, and tax designation. I knew the specific smell of printer toner at 2 a.m. when we were rushing to meet a proposal deadline. I knew which clients paid on the Netminus 30 terms and which ones needed a gentle, firm phone call on day 31. I knew the rhythm of our money, or what I believed was our money. The inflow from closings, the outflow for materials, payroll, the sleek new company car he leased. I knew the cadence of his ambition, the restless energy that demanded constant new projects, bigger risks, grander statements. And then, imperceptibly at first, the rhythm changed. It started as a faint, offbeat syncopation, a transfer to an unfamiliar account code labeled Strategic Development Cayman. A series of consulting fees, substantial ones, paid to a corporate entity with an opaque name and no website I could find. Unexplained dips in the operating account balance, explained away with a wave of his hand and a familiar refrain. Leverage, Alex. You have to spend money to make money. We're playing in the big leagues now. His vocabulary began to sprinkle with new terms. Bridge financing, asset maximization, crypto futures. The late nights, once a source of shared exhaustion after a joint push, became more frequent and more solitary. He'd come home after midnight smelling of expensive scotch and a perfume that wasn't mine. His criticisms, once rare and usually tied to stress, became a constant, low-grade background hum. My cooking, once praised, was now a bit bland. My circle of friends, mostly other young moms and my old colleague from the firm, were nice but not exactly driven. And my ambitions? Where are your ambitions, Alex? He'd ask, not unkindly, while I was up to my elbows in spreadsheet formulas to make payroll. You're so capable. You should want more than this. The breathtaking irony of being told I lacked ambition while single-handedly propping up his life, his business, and his home was almost impressive in its sheer, audacious blindness. The space between us grew, a cold, expanding universe, and that space began to be filled by a presence named Brittany Sawyer. She was 27, a recent hire for business development. I saw her LinkedIn photo. Glossy blonde hair, a bright, practiced smile, a head tilted at a confident angle. Vincent mentioned her often. Brittany secured a great lead today. Brittany has amazing instincts for client relations. Then I saw her in person, by accident, at a bistro he'd told me was a working dinner with a difficult investor. I was picking up a cake for Tyler's birthday. Through the window, I saw them. Not just dining, leaning close. Her laugh, bright and bell-like, cut through the chatter of the restaurant. Her hand rested on his forearm, a possessive, familiar gesture. She was wearing the necklace I'd admired in a boutique window months ago and had mentioned wanting. I confronted him that night, my voice trembling with a confusion of hurt and rage. His reaction was swift, nuclear and masterful. He didn't deny, he attacked. Are you spying on me now? After everything I'm trying to build for this family? Do you have any idea the pressure I'm under? She's an employee, Alexis. A good one. I took her to dinner to celebrate a win. Is that a crime now? I can't believe you don't trust me. He made my reasonable fear seem like a betrayal of his trust. He made my observations seem like surveillance. He reframed his secrecy as necessary burden-bearing. It was a dazzling, disorienting pivot. That was the first time I felt the cold trickle of true, primal fear seep into my bones. Not fear of losing him. That ship, I realized with a sickening lurch, had already sailed. The fear was of the unknown shape and depth of the hole he was digging. I was no longer just a wife feeling neglected. I was a co-pilot in a plane I could no longer see the controls of, with a captain who was staring at the clouds and telling me the instrument panel was lying. The catalyst, the moment the plane entered the nosedive, came on a random, unremarkable Tuesday. He was working late again. Tyler, now 12, was asleep after finishing his homework. The house was silent, but it was a different silence from the one I began this story with. This was a heavy, pregnant silence, full of unasked questions and looming dread. And I, the bookkeeper, the silent engine, finally decided to stop trusting the captain's assurances and run my own diagnostic on the aircraft. I logged into the business accounts from my laptop at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared family meals, where I'd helped Tyler with his spelling, where Vincent had first told me he wanted a divorce. I had administrative access to everything. I always had. He'd never revoked it, perhaps because he never truly considered me a threat, or perhaps because he was too disorganized to think of it. I began to follow the digital breadcrumbs, the anomalous transfers, the mysterious account codes. What I found wasn't a hole. It was a chasm, a yawning, black, bottomless financial gorge. I started with our home, the beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in the Willow Creek subdivision, the showpiece he loved to give tour of. The mortgage statement showed a balance of around $400,000. That seemed right. But then I found the second mortgage, taken out 4 years prior, for $350,000, labeled Business Expansion Seed Capital. Then a third mortgage, a home equity line maxed out to the tune of another $350,000, taken out just 18 months ago, labeled Portfolio Diversification. My hands grew cold on the keyboard. Total debt secured against our home, $1.1 million. A quick search of comparable homes in our neighborhood put the market value at maybe $850,000 on a good day. We weren't just living in a house. We were living in a debt instrument. We were $250,000 underwater on our own roof. I moved to the business accounts. Mercer Holdings, the glowing success story. The lines of credit, 3 of them were maxed out. A total of $200,000. Back taxes owed to the state and IRS, $85,000 and climbing with penalties. Outstanding invoices to vendors, lumberyards, plumbing suppliers, electricians, over $120,000. Equipment loans for trucks and tools, $75,000. The business, the Golden Goose, was actually a plucked bird sitting on a nest of IOUs. Nearly $500,000 in obligations, and that was just what I could immediately trace. The cars. The sleek BMW SUV he drove, the Audi I used for errands and school runs, both were leased. Luxuriously, expensively leased with balloon payments looming. The watches, the suits, the memberships at the club, all on credit. The lifestyle was a facade, a beautifully decorated false front. Then I traced the outflow. Where had all this borrowed money gone? I opened a new spreadsheet, my fingers moving on autopilot, a detached part of my brain marveling at my own calm. Cryptocurrency exchange statements, transfers totaling $180,000 over 2 years. Current value of the portfolio, $3,422. Vanished into the volatile digital ether. Online brokerage accounts linked to sports books. Deposits and losses totaling $75,000. A lease agreement for a sleek one-bedroom apartment in the trendy downtown lofts. $2,500 a month, signed for a year. Payments for furniture deliveries to that address. A king bed, a sectional sofa, high-end cookware. Another $30,000. And then the piece de resistance. Regular transfers every month to a personal account in Brittany Sawyer's name, labeled Consulting Market Analysis. $4,000 a month for over a year. I sat back. The numbers glowed on my laptop screen in the dark kitchen, a constellation of financial ruin. I added the columns. I double-checked. I triple-checked. The total debt, the sum of every hidden loan, every maxed-out line, every unpaid bill, every siphoned-off dollar came to approximately $1.9 million. The breath left my body in a slow, silent exhale. My husband, Vincent Mercer, the empire builder, the visionary, was not a titan of industry. He was a stage designer, a master of illusion. And our life, the beautiful house, the successful business, the future we'd planned, was an elaborate, breathtakingly expensive set, and the scaffolding behind it was rotten, buckling under the weight of its own pretense. My first instinct was pure animalistic. To run upstairs, shake him awake, scream the numbers in his face, watch his own mask crack under the truth. To throw things. To cry. To demand answers, explanations, a reckoning. But then, cutting through the white noise of panic, I heard my grandmother's voice, clear as a bell across the years. Own money. And my eyes drifted from the screen of ruin to a small, leather-bound notebook where I kept my personal passwords. I thought of the one clean, separate, untouched thing in this entire quagmire. My $401,000 from the law firm, which I'd rolled into an IRA. I logged in. It had grown, steadily and quietly, to about $180,000. I thought of the inheritance from Grandma, who had passed when I was 28. $340,000. I had never commingled it, never used it for a vacation, a car, a mortgage payment. It sat in a separate savings account, a sacred cow. $520,000 in total, my son's future, the only real asset in this sea of liabilities. Confrontation, I realized with a clarity that felt like ice water in my veins, would be a catastrophic error. It would bring chaos, lies, manipulation. He'd spin a story. He'd blame the market, bad luck, my nagging, the stress of providing. He'd make me doubt my own evidence. And worse, the most chilling thought, if he knew I knew the full extent, he might become desperate. He might try to find a way to get his hands on my money, the last lifeboat. He'd argue it was marital, that it should be used to save our business, our home. He was a convincing man, and I was, on paper, his overwhelmed, financially naive wife. So I made a choice. The first, deliberate, cold-blooded choice of the long game. I closed the laptop. I erased my browsing history. I made sure no files were saved to the desktop. And I went to bed, lying beside his sleeping form, my heart hammering against my ribs like a prisoner trying to escape. I didn't say a word. The next morning, I made Vincent coffee. The French press, his favorite. I set it beside his plate along with the financial section of the newspaper. "Sleep okay?" I asked, my voice steady, normal. He grunted, scrolling through his phone. "Tough night. The financing on the Oak Ridge project is being a headache." "I'm sure you'll figure it out," I said, the lie smooth and easy on my tongue. I played my part. The supportive, slightly boring, reliably present wife. But inside, a new Alexis was waking up. A strategist. A general surveying a battlefield where the enemy was blissfully unaware the war had even begun. My first move was pure defense. protection. I called my uncle, my mother's brother, a retired CPA with a sharp mind and a deep, quiet distrust of Vincent's flashiness. We met for lunch at a quiet diner. I laid it out for him, just the facts of my separate assets, not Vincent's debt. "I want to protect this for Tyler," I said, "no matter what happens." He understood immediately. Within a week, he helped me establish an irrevocable trust for Tyler. Every single penny of my separate money, the $180,000 IRA, the $340,000 inheritance, was transferred into it. The trust was structured so that I was the trustee, managing it for Tyler's benefit until he turned 25, but I was not a beneficiary. Neither was Vincent. It was a financial fortress, legally untouchable by Vincent, by future creditors of either of us, by any calamity. It was no longer my money. It was Tyler's future, locked in a vault and the key thrown into a constitutional void. The relief was profound. I had secured the beachhead. My second move was intelligence gathering, documentation. I became a ghost in the machine of my own life. Over the next few weeks, I conducted a silent, thorough audit. I copied every damning file, mortgage documents with their shocking balances, loan agreements with punitive interest rates, bank statements showing transfers to crypto exchanges and gambling sites, the lease for the downtown apartment, with the address clearly listed, the credit card bills for its furnishings. I accessed the business server and downloaded everything. I printed duplicates in the middle of the night on the office printer. I created 3 identical sets of evidence. One set went into a safe deposit box at a bank where we did no other business, under my maiden name. Another set went to my sister's house, sealed in a waterproof lockbox. The third lived on an encrypted, password-protected external drive that I kept in my purse at all times. I documented the lie brick by fraudulent brick, creating a paper trail so clear and undeniable it would be bulletproof in any courtroom. And then, the hardest part, I waited. I knew the finale was inevitable. Men like Vincent don't change course. They accelerate. They grow bored with the old model. They begin to believe their own publicity. They trade in the wife who knows too much of the struggle for a shiny new partner who only sees the polished result. It was only a matter of time before he decided to cash in his chips, or more accurately, pass the debt-laden table to someone else and walk away with what he thought was the pot. I just had to be ready, my evidence organized, my own position fortified, when he finally made his move. For 3 years, I lived a meticulously crafted double life. Publicly, I was Alexis Mercer, the slightly tired, supportive wife, the capable but unassuming organizer, the pleasantly faded background to his starring role. I hosted dinner parties for his clients, laughing at their jokes, complimenting his insights. I listened to his grandiose plans, nodding along, asking soft, encouraging questions. Privately, I was the archivist of his downfall. I watched him take out another strategic loan to pay the interest on the old ones, deepening the chasm. I saw the genuine stress in his eyes that he thought he hid so well, the panic he drowned in increasingly expensive bottles of scotch. I noted the new lies, the new secret accounts, the growing financial desperation masked by louder boasts and flashier purchases. I smiled at his jokes, I soothed his frustrations, and all the while the trap sat fully assembled in those 3 sets of binders, waiting for its moment to spring. It came, as I knew it would, on another Tuesday. The symmetry was almost poetic. He was calm, almost clinical. He'd sent Tyler to a friend's house for a sleepover. He sat me down at the same kitchen table where I'd discovered the truth. He didn't look at me but at a point on the wall behind my head. "Alexis," he began, his voice devoid of emotion. "This isn't working. I want a divorce." He paused, letting the words hang. When I said nothing, he continued, his tone shifting to one of magnanimous concession. I'll be keeping the house, the business, the cars, the assets I've built. It's only fair they're tied to my work. You can have Tyler, of course. And I'll give you a small settlement to help you get started. $50,000. He presented it like a boardroom proposal, a hostile takeover of our shared life. The 15 years of partnership, the 11 years of my unpaid labor, the family we'd created, all reduced to a cold, insulting asset division. And my son, my beautiful, kind-hearted son, offered as a consolation prize, a liability he was graciously allowing me to assume. He expected a fight. He was braced for tears, for rage, for a messy, expensive battle that would drain what little liquid assets remained. He had his lawyer, the shark-like Harold Whitfield, already on retainer, already primed for war. I gave him silence, a long, stretching silence where I simply looked at him, taking in the clean lines of his face, the confidence in his posture, the utter lack of guilt or remorse. Then I summoned a single, perfect, shaky tear. I let it trace a path down my cheek. I dropped my gaze to my hands, clasped in my lap. My voice, when I finally spoke, was a fragile whisper, barely audible. I just want what's fair, Vincent. I just want it to be over. The relief that washed over his face was palpable. He'd won. The troublesome wife was capitulating without a struggle. He mistook my profound, strategic calm for defeat. It was his second critical error. The first was building his life on sand. The second was assuming I was too weak to read the geological survey. What followed was a masterclass in acting, a performance that deserved, if not an Oscar, then certainly a settlement agreement in my favor. I needed my own counsel, someone sharp, ethical, and formidable. I went back to my old law firm, not for Vincent, but for a name. They recommended Nina Castellano, 52, known in family law circles as the Barracuda for her tenacity, but with a reputation for fierce protection of her clients, especially those she perceived as vulnerable. In our first meeting, I played the role perfectly. I sat in her sleek, modern office, wearing my most nondescript cardigan, my hands trembling slightly as I accepted a glass of water. I told her Vincent's version. He wanted everything. He was offering a pittance. I was lost. I was scared. Nina's eyes softened with professional pity. She laid out a battle plan, her voice firm and reassuring. Alexis, under the law, you are entitled to roughly half of the marital estate. That house, that business, you helped build them. We fight. We subpoena records, we hire a forensic accountant, we go for spousal support. It will be contentious, but you will not walk away with just $50,000. I shook my head slowly, letting my shoulders slump further. I don't want to fight, Nina. I can't. The stress, it's eating me alive. I just want out. I'll take the $50,000. My personal things, shared custody, that's all. Nina was baffled, then frustrated. He's walking all over you. This is a terrible deal. You're giving away millions in equity. That's when I reached into my large, sensible tote bag. I placed 3 thick black binders on her polished desk with a soft, definitive thump. Turn to the appendix in binder 1, I said, my voice shedding its tremor, becoming clear, level, and calm for the first time in her presence. The liability schedule. Tab C. The shift in the room's atmosphere was instantaneous. The pity evaporated from Nina's face. She opened the binder, her eyes scanning the summary page I'd prepared, a single sheet listing total assets, market value, and total liabilities, the staggering reality. I watched her face change. Confusion, then focused intensity as she flipped to the supporting documents, her eyes darting across mortgage statements, loan agreements, brokerage loss summaries. Then a slow, dawning admiration. She looked up at me, her gaze sharp and reassessing. You've known about this, she stated, not asked. For 3 years, I confirmed. I was waiting for him to leave. He's not asking for assets, Nina. He's demanding debt. He just doesn't know it yet. Nina Castellano leaned back in her chair, a slow, razor-thin smile spreading across her face. It was the smile of a mathematician who has just been shown an elegant, devastatingly simple proof. "I see," she said softly. "So, we don't fight the division. We insist on it. We make sure the agreement is crystal clear that he is assuming all assets along with all attached and associated liabilities. We bury the full disclosure in the addendum, legally attached and referenced. We make him sign for the whole package." "Exactly," I said. "He'll never agree to an audit if he thinks he's getting a windfall," Nina mused. "He'll be in a hurry." "He already refused one," I said. "His own lawyer suggested it months ago, according to a memo I found. Vincent declined." Nina's smile widened. "Perfect. Then our job is to be the most agreeable, pushover clients in the history of divorce law. We let him run the show. We just make sure the paperwork reflects the full picture." And so, the performance entered its most critical phase. The mediation sessions were my stage. I dressed for the part. Soft, shapeless sweaters, minimal makeup, my hair pulled into a simple, meek ponytail. I perfected the body language of defeat. Slumped shoulders, downcast eyes, hands clasped tightly in my lap. I spoke in halting, hesitant sentences. I let my voice waver. I agreed to every point Vincent's lawyer made, always asking for just a little less, seeming desperate for the whole painful process to just be over. I was the picture of a woman broken by the end of her marriage, eager to take any scrap and flee. Vincent's arrogance, fed by my performance, ballooned into something grotesque. He bought himself a $15,000 Patek Philippe watch to celebrate his impending win, charging it to a business account I still monitored. He began openly parading Brittany through our home, my home, while I still lived there, letting her pick out new furniture, criticizing my decor. "We need to modernize the place," he'd say, as she nodded enthusiastically. He even enlisted his mother, Lorraine, the woman who had always treated me as slightly subpar hired help, to help me pack my belongings. Her help consisted of sorting my things into two piles. What she deemed I could keep: old clothes, worn shoes, a few family photos, and what was a marital asset. Any jewelry he'd ever given me, the good silverware, the art we'd bought together. She packed the keep pile into black plastic garbage bags. The symbolism wasn't subtle. I was being taken out with the trash. The final delicious twist in his delusion came from my friend, Diane, or the woman I had thought was my friend for 20 years, since we were awkward freshmen in high school. She was my first call after Vincent's announcement, my shoulder to cry on. She was so supportive, so indignant on my behalf. But soon I noticed little things. Information I'd shared only with her, a specific concern about a clause in the draft settlement, my anxiety about finding an apartment in a certain neighborhood, would somehow reach Vincent. He'd make offhand comments that mirrored my private fears too precisely. The penny dropped when I remembered the way Diane had always looked at Vincent, the little laughs, the lingering touches. She'd been carrying a quiet torch for him for years, and he, the collector of admiration, had fanned it into a useful flame. He'd made her feel special, hinted at a future after the divorce, and in return, she'd become his spy. Instead of cutting her off, I used her. I became a playwright, feeding Diane carefully crafted lines of despair and defeat. "I just don't have the energy to fight anymore," I'd sob to her over the phone. "I'm looking at tiny apartments by the train tracks because that's all I can afford. I'm worried Nina isn't fighting hard enough for me, but what can I do?" I served her a feast of my weakness, and she, believing she was his indispensable insider, delivered it straight to him. Through her, Vincent's smugness grew exponentially. His certainty of victory became absolute. The climax of his hubris was his refusal of the one thing that could have saved him. In a final pre-signing meeting, his lawyer, Harold Whitfield, a good lawyer who was doing his job, expressed unease. Vincent, she's giving up a lot without a fight. It's unusual. I strongly recommend we commission an independent financial audit before you sign anything binding, just to verify the asset values and ensure there are no hidden liabilities. Vincent, giddy with impending freedom and Brittany's promises, shut him down immediately. No audits, Harold. I built that company. I know exactly what it's worth. I'm not paying some accountant 10 grand to tell me what I already know. She's beaten, Harold. She just wants out. Let's not drag this out. Harold, a veteran of countless divorces, knew a client about to step off a cliff when he saw one. He insisted, "At least let me put in a standard verification clause." "No," Vincent said, impatient. "Brittany wants this done. I want this done. No more delays, no more clauses. Draw up the final papers." With profound professional misgiving, Harold had Vincent sign a waiver, a document acknowledging that his lawyer had recommended an independent financial review and that the client, Vincent Mercer, was declining said review against legal advice. Vincent signed it without reading it, the way he signed everything in those days, his mind already on his new life. He was, in that moment, signing his own financial death warrant. I owe Brittany a debt of gratitude. Her impatience was worth millions to my strategy. The stage was set. The players were in position. The arrogant husband, the complicit girlfriend, the spy friend, the worried but overruled lawyer, the sharp lawyer playing dumb, and me, the quiet architect in the wings. All that was left was the final act, the unveiling. The courtroom was quiet, a secular chapel where lives were legally unraveled. The air was still, smelling of lemon polish and old wood. Vincent signed the final stack of documents with a theatrical flourish, beaming at Harold, shooting a triumphant, gloating glance at his mother, Lorraine, who sat primly in the gallery, a small, satisfied smile on her lips. The judge, Patricia Holden, was a woman in her 60s with a cap of silver hair and eyes that had seen every shade of human venality, desperation, and spite. She radiated a weary intelligence. She reviewed the case file, her reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked at me, then at Vincent, then back at the papers in front of her. "This is a highly unusual proposed division, Mrs. Dunst," she said, her voice dry and measured. "You are relinquishing all claim to substantial marital property, the family residence, the business entity, the vehicles, in exchange for a one-time payment of $50,000. Are you doing this voluntarily?" I looked down at my hands, then up, meeting her gaze with what I hoped looked like fragile, resolute dignity. "Yes, Your Honor. Are you under any duress? Has anyone pressured you into this agreement?" "No, Your Honor," I whispered, letting my voice break just slightly. I want my husband to have the business he built. I don't want to fight anymore. I just want this to be over so we can both move on and focus on our son." The words were perfectly pitched, self-sacrificing, weary, noble in a defeated way. Judge Holden studied me for a long moment. I could see the skepticism in her eyes, the desire to protect what she saw as a woman being steamrolled. But I was an adult, represented by competent counsel, and stating my wishes clearly. The law tied her hands. She nodded slowly, reluctantly. "Very well." She turned to Harold Whitfield. "Mr. Whitfield, does your client affirm the terms?" "He does, Your Honor." "And the agreement includes a full and complete disclosure of assets and liabilities as required by statute?" "It does, Your Honor. All schedules are attached." "Proceed with the signing." It was done. The clerk collected the papers, stamping each signature page. Vincent looked like he'd just won the Super Bowl. And then, as the clerk was preparing the judge's final order, Harold, doing his due diligence, began a final review of the complete document package. Main agreement signed. Asset schedule signed. Settlement terms signed. Parenting plan signed. Then he reached the last substantive attachment, I watched, my breath still in my lungs, as his practiced eyes scanned the page. They stopped. They jumped back to the top. They scanned again, slower this time. His brow, normally smooth with professional assurance, furrowed deeply. A vertical line appeared between his eyebrows. He leaned over to Vincent, his whisper cutting through the quiet room, urgent and sharp. "Vincent!" A pause. "The liabilities. The mortgages, the business debt, it's all listed here. You're assuming personal responsibility for all of it. All of these obligations transfer to you upon signing." Vincent, still basking, chuckled softly, a dismissive sound. "What? No, that's just the house note. Standard stuff." "No," Harold insisted, his finger tapping the paper with growing agitation. "It's everything. Look. The second mortgage, the third mortgage, the business lines of credit, the back taxes, the vendor debts, the equipment loans, the lease obligations on the cars. It's itemized. It totals." He squinted at the sum at the bottom of the page. "It totals $1.9 million. Vincent, the assets you're getting, they aren't worth this. Not even close." The confusion on Vincent's face was almost comical, a cartoonish blankness. Then, as the numbers penetrated the haze of his triumph, it morphed. Confusion into disbelief, disbelief into dawning horror. He snatched the paper from Harold's hands. His eyes, wide and frantic, darted down the column of numbers, numbers I had typed, numbers I knew by heart, numbers that had haunted my dreams for 3 years. I saw his lips move silently as he tried to add them, to find an error, a loophole, a mistake. The blood drained from his face in a visible wave, leaving him a ghastly ashen gray. He looked up, not at his lawyer, not at the judge, but directly at me. His eyes locked onto mine, and in them I saw the full, horrific realization bloom like a poisonous flower. The years of my quiet support, my lack of fight, my meek acceptance. It wasn't weakness. It was strategy. The architecture of his ruin had my fingerprints all over it. His voice, when it finally came, was a strangled, ragged thing, stripped of all its former confidence. This is a mistake. These numbers are wrong." Judge Holden peered over her glasses, unimpressed. "Mr. Mercer, is there a problem?" She's hidden this." He spat, his voice rising, a trembling finger pointing accusingly across the room at me. "This is fraudulent. She's fabricated these liabilities." The judge's voice became glacier calm, the calm before a gavel strikes. "Counselor," she said, turning her unblinking gaze to Harold Whitfield. Harold stood, the picture of professional anguish. He had a job to do, and part of it was damage control for a client who had ignored his advice. "Your Honor, my client has just become aware of the significant liabilities attached to the assets listed in Schedule C. I must note for the record that I had advised Mr. Mercer to obtain a full, independent financial audit prior to executing this agreement. He declined that advice. I have in my file a signed waiver to that effect." He walked to the clerk's desk and placed a single sheet of paper on it. The waiver. Judge Holden took the paper. She read it slowly. She looked up at Vincent, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Mercer, you were advised by your own attorney to verify the value of what you were claiming. You refused. You signed a document waiving that review. This liability disclosure," she said, tapping the offending Schedule C with one finger, "is attached to the agreement you just signed. It is clear. It is specific. There is no evidence of fabrication. These are mortgages and loans in your name for your property and business. Are you now claiming you were unaware of your own financial obligations?" Vincent was unraveling in his seat, a marionette with cut strings. "But I didn't know it was this much. She kept the books. She hid the extent." "You are a businessman, Mr. Mercer," Judge Holden said, her tone leaving no room for appeal. "You are claiming a business, multiple properties, and substantial assets. A reasonable person, let alone a purportedly savvy one, would verify their value before agreeing to assume sole responsibility for them. You chose not to. That is not fraud. That is your choice. The agreement, with its full disclosure as provided by Mrs. Dunst's counsel, stands as signed. She didn't wait for another sputtered objection. She lifted the gavel. The sound, when it came, was a sharp, final crack that echoed in the silent room. The settlement is approved. The marriage is dissolved. Mrs. Dunst, you have your settlement. Mr. Mercer, you have the assets and all associated liabilities as per your agreement. This court is adjourned. I stood. The movement felt fluid, effortless. I gathered my purse, the same sensible tote that had carried the binders of evidence. I did not look at the crumbling man in the expensive suit, now slumped forward, his head in his hands. I did not look at his horrified mother, whose triumphant smile had twisted into a rictus of shock. I did not look at Harold Whitfield, who was already speaking to his client in low, urgent tones. I turned, my back straight, and I walked out of that courtroom, through the heavy wooden doors, into the bland, fluorescent light of the 7th-floor hallway. And there, leaning against the cool wall, I took the first deep, clean, unburdened breath I had taken in 3 years. It tasted of freedom, and it was sweeter than I ever could have imagined. The aftermath was a quiet, predictable, almost graceful collapse, like watching a building scheduled for demolition finally sink into its own foundation. Brittany Sawyer, the Instagram-perfect future, lasted about 3 weeks. The calls from creditors started almost immediately. The $4,000 a month consulting payments stopped. When she realized the luxury apartment was about to be reclaimed, the sports car was a lease he could no longer pay, and the man she'd attached herself to was not a tycoon but a bankrupt, she vanished. She left a note, I was told, that said, "This isn't what I signed up for." I imagine her already scrolling through dating apps, her criteria now including verified liquid assets. The house, the beautiful colonial in Willow Creek, went into foreclosure within 6 months. The banks weren't sentimental. Vincent tried to sell it, but no one buys a home for more than it's worth. The for sale sign grew faded and weathered, a monument to dead equity. Mercer Holdings was dissolved by creditors within the year. The lines of credit were called. The tax liens were enforced. The unpaid vendors filed lawsuits. The office furniture was repossessed. The golden goose was not just dead. It was dissected for scraps. The $15,000 watch was pawned, I assume, for a fraction of its value. The leased cars were returned, early termination fees piling on. Lorraine's perfect son became a recurring topic of hushed, pitying conversations at her country club. Her Christmas newsletter that year was famously brief. Vincent is exploring new opportunities and focusing on personal growth. I heard she took out a second mortgage on her own home to try and help him, a bailout that vanished into the same bottomless pit. He showed up at my small apartment, a 2-bedroom with a sage green kitchen I'd painted myself, about 4 months after the divorce. I saw him through the peephole, a ghost of the man I'd married. He'd lost weight, the wrong kind. His clothes hung on him. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, hollowed-out need. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. He stood on the welcome mat, stammering. "Alexis, I didn't know. I made mistakes. I know that now. But I didn't mean for, can we talk? Maybe we can figure something out. Maybe we could." He couldn't even finish the sentence. Couldn't bring himself to say, "Get back together," or "You help me." I looked at him, this stranger I'd shared a life with, and felt nothing but a vast, peaceful emptiness. "You asked for everything except our son," I said, my voice calm and clear in the quiet hallway. "You got exactly what you wanted, Vincent." I closed the door. I listened as he stood there for another minute, then heard his footsteps, slow and heavy, retreat down the stairs. I never saw him again. My friend Diane tried to call, her voice shaking with pathetic apology. I had no idea it was this bad, Alexis. I never meant, I thought Vincent and I didn't answer. I didn't give her the catharsis of my forgiveness. Some betrayals are too profound. Some friendships are burned beyond any possible repair. 20 years of history, ashes for the vain hope of a wink from a bankrupt man. She was his problem now. My son, Tyler, my wise, quiet boy, understood everything. Not because I explained the financial machinations, but because he watched. He saw his father's facade crumble. He saw the truth emerge. He saw me build a new life, piece by careful piece. One evening, he said to me, "You waited a long time, Mom." I just nodded. He hugged me, a real, tight 15-year-old hug that said more than words ever could. His future, his college, his first home, his safety net, was secure in that ironclad trust. That was the only victory that ever truly mattered. My $50,000 settlement bought stability. First and last month's rent, a reliable used car, a fresh start. I went back to school, using what was left to get a certification in interior design. The dream I'd put on hold at 23. My first client was a woman my age, also starting over. We painted her kitchen sage green. She called it the color of new beginnings. My revenge was not an explosion of drama. It was an erosion. A patient, relentless letting go. I didn't take anything from Vincent Mercer. I simply stopped propping up his illusions. I let the weight of the world he'd built, a world of lies, debt, and arrogance, settle onto his shoulders and his alone. I handed him the deed to the ruins he'd constructed and walked away, my son's hand in mine, toward solid ground. The most powerful vengeance isn't seized with a shout. It's delivered in a whisper after years of silence. It's the quiet click of a final domino falling. Sometimes, the kindest, most devastating thing you can do for a person who believes they deserve everything is to give them exactly what they ask for. Thank you for listening.